Hello guys, in this video tutorial I will brief you about the Scrum in detail. What is Scrum? Scrum is an agile method that focuses on managing iterative development rather than specific agile practice. Scrum is basically a management framework that team use to self-organize and work towards a common goal. Scrum describes a set of meetings, tools, and roles for efficient project delivery. Much like a sports team practicing for a big match, Scrum practices allow teams to self manage, learn from the experience, and adapt to change throughout the development phases. There are three basic phases of Scrum. The initial phase is an outline planning phase where you establish general objectives for the project and design the software architecture. So you define your objectives for the project and then you start designing the architecture, and this architecture is the base for the later changes. This is followed by another phase, which is a series of sprint cycles where each cycle develops an increment of the system. Then project closure phase, which is the last phase, which wraps up the project, completes the required documentation such as system help frames and user manuals, and accesses the lesson learned from the project. Now, there are few Scrum terminologies that you must learn. A development team, a self-organizing group of software developers, which should be no more than 7 people. So this is the standard. It can exceed to up to 8 and 9, but the standard is 7. They are responsible for developing a software and other essential project documentation. Potentially shippable product increment, the software increment that is delivered from the sprint. Laterally I will discuss about the sprint in detail. So the software increment that is delivered from the sprint, the idea is that this should be potentially shippable, which means that it is in a finishing state and no further work is required, such as testing is needed to incorporate it into the final product. In practice, this is not always achievable. Then comes a product backlog. The product backlog is a dynamic list of features, requirements, enhancements, and fixes that must be completed for the project success. It is essentially the team's to-do list, means which requirement should be implemented, which task should be done by the team. So the product backlog contains this. It is constantly revisited and reprioritized to adapt to market changes. The product owner maintains and updates the list because the end requirements are for the user or customer, and they mostly come from the product owner. Removing irrelevant items or adding new requests from the customer. Then comes a product owner. Who is a product owner? An individual whose job is to identify product feature or requirements, prioritize these for development, and continuously reviewing the product backlog to ensure that product continues to meet the critical business needs, or we can say the business requirement or business goals. Remember one thing, the word prioritize is used. So different techniques are available that use different criteria to prioritize your user requirements and prioritize based on the need, cost, time, etc. Now, what is Scrum? Scrum is basically a daily meeting of the Scrum team, means the developer meeting, regular meeting comprise a Scrum that reviews progress and prioritize work to be done that day. Ideally, this should be a short face-to-face meeting that includes the whole team. Scrum Master, or we can say Scrum Leader. Scrum Masters are the champion for the Scrum within their team. They are accountable for the Scrum team effectiveness. They coach teams, product owners, and business to improve its Scrum process and optimize the delivery. Scrum leaders are also responsible for doing the different activities. So Scrum Master is responsible for ensures the Scrum process is followed and guide the team in the effective use of Scrum. He or she is responsible for interfacing with the rest of company and for ensuring that Scrum team is not diverted by outside interference. Now come to sprint. What is the sprint? What is mean by the word sprint? So a development iteration. A development iteration sprint are usually 2 to 4 weeks long. So minimum duration is 14 days and maximum duration for this iteration or sprint is 4 weeks. Now this is Scrum sprint cycle. Scrum is the development team and sprint is the development iteration. So rework done. So it will start from the rework, because this is the manifesto of Agile or Scrum framework, that change is welcome and you must have to do the rework. So after the rework to be done, finalized, which work should be done, so select item from the product backlog. So product backlog is a list of specification or requirements or to-do list that are for the end users or that come from the product owner. Then you plan for the sprint and then you design a sprint. So you get your material for sprint from the sprint backlog. So what is sprint backlog? So sprint backlog is basically the to-do list of the different activities for the particular sprint. The sprint backlog is the list of items to be completed by development team in the current sprint cycle. So there is a difference between product backlog and sprint backlog. Product backlog contain list of all the specification, requirements, enhancements, features, etc. And sprint backlog are those list of items, to-do list of items that are to be developed in a particular sprint that usually takes 2 to 4 weeks. So sprint backlog is a list of items to be completed by the development team in the current sprint cycle. Before each sprint, the team chooses which items it will work from the product backlog. So this means the material or the requirements, prioritized requirements for the sprint backlog come from this product backlog, and then from this sprint backlog we then design the sprint and develop the particular iteration, and then it goes to the potentially shippable software after the integration. And then we review sprint after negotiation with the customer, and then if any rework is required, we go back to this phase, and then we proceed this cycle again and again. Sprint are fixed length, normally 2 to 4 weeks. Starting point for planning is the product backlog, which is list of work to be done on the project. The selection phase involve all of the project team who work with the customer to select the features and functionality from the product backlog to be developed during the sprint. So I already discussed these points in the previous slide. Once these are agreed, the team organize themselves to develop the software. During this stage, the team is isolated from the customer and organization, with all the communication channeled through the so-called Scrum Master. This means Scrum Master or Scrum Leader is the bridge between the customer and the development team. So all the communication among the developers, team members, and the customer will be assured by the will be channeled through Scrum Master. The role of Scrum Leader or Scrum Master is to protect the development team from external distraction. And the one main reason is the miscommunication can happen, so that can yield laterally more problems. At the end of this sprint, of the particular sprint, the work done is reviewed and presented to the different stakeholders. The next sprint cycle then begins. So in next sprint cycle, you can see in the previous slide, then we select a particular sprint from the sprint backlog, which is updated from the product backlog, and then we proceed the sprint cycle. Teamwork in the Scrum. So the Scrum Master is a facilitator who arranges daily meetings, tracks the backlog of work to be done, records the decisions, measures progress against the backlog, and communications with the customer and management outside the team. The whole team attends short daily meetings, or we can say scrums, where all the team members share information, describe their progress since the last meeting, problem that have arisen, and what is planned for the following day, and that must be followed. This means that everyone on the team knows what is going on, and if problem arise, can replan the short-term work to cope with them. Scrum benefits. The product is broken into set of manageable and understandable chunks, or we can say product is divided into different increments, and then through iteration we work on the particular increment after negotiation with the stakeholder. If any rework required, so we will repeat the Scrum cycle. The whole team have visibility of everything, and consequently team communication is improved. So this alternative means strong communication or effective communication channels are required, or stakeholder must or developer team must have to improve their communication. So we can also say that Scrum is Scrum is a communication rich process. Customers see on time delivery of increments and gain feedback on how the product works. Trust between customer and developer is established, and a positive culture is created in which everyone expects a project to succeed. Distributed Scrum. So different types of activities or roles defined for the Scrum. Distributed Scrum are: a Scrum Master should be located with the development team so that he or she is aware of every problem, because he is a master, he is initiator, and he is a moderator of this whole process. The product owner, because product owner role is very important, because the end product is for that owner, and the change come from the product owner. So this means the product backlog will be updated on the request of the, or we can say after negotiation or communicating on the product with the owner, we will update the product backlog, and then we will select particular feature of the increment for the sprint. Real-time communications between team members for informal communication, particularly instant messaging and video call. Remember, one thing is that there are two categories of or we can say two types of communication. One is formal communication, where you discuss only on the main agenda, and one is informal communication. So using instant messaging, video calls, using modern social media apps, and with informal communication, the collaboration among the team, or alternately the scrum master with the product owner, increases, and this help in the effective communication. Continuous integration, so that team members can be aware of the state of the product at any time. Integration is basically to integrate two or more than two increments. So it is very much important. A common development environment for all the teams, and video conferencing between the product owner and the development team. So video conference meeting can be arranged either direct with the team or with the scrum master. So this was all about the scrum in detail. Thank you so much for watching my video.